Hello and welcome back to the Wasteland, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about 10 perks that are seemingly good in Fallout New Vegas, but are not quite as good as they might seem. So these are kind of deceptive perks. That doesn't necessarily mean that these perks are entirely bad. There are actually a couple of them on here that are pretty decent, and we will talk about them. Coming in at our number 10 spot, we have Splash Damage. Splash Damage is one of these perks that can actually be really good, but it can also be potentially bad. Splash Damage is a level 12 perk that requires 70 explosives. This one is meant for an explosives build, and what this perk does is that all of your explosives have a 25% larger blast radius. Now, on paper, that actually sounds really good. If you have a bigger blast radius, that means you can hit more potential enemies. The problem here comes from the fact that explosives work in both directions. Explosives don't care about friendly fire, and explosives tend to have really high damage. So if you have an even bigger explosion radius, that means you are more likely to get hit from your own explosives as well. Now, this can be very devastating, especially in outdoor areas, and with certain explosives, this may or may not be a big deal because explosives do have different explosion radiuses, where something like dynamite has a fairly small explosion radius compared to something like the Fat Man that has a very big explosion radius, and it's going to be virtually impossible for you to use a Fat Man indoors, whereas you could still use dynamite indoors. It's going to be kind of awkward, but you could do it. So outside, this perk is actually pretty good. Inside, not as much. And whenever I do an explosives build, I'm always kind of torn on taking this one because I'm always afraid I might blow myself up more than I already do with those type of builds because I'm not the best at judging distance. Coming in at number 9, we have Weapons Handling. This is another perk that can be good, although it's only good on specific builds and if you want to be using specific weapons. So weapons handling is a level 16 perk, and the only requirement is that you have to have less than 10 strength in order to get this. Once you take this, then it gives you 2 strength towards any sort of weapon requirement. Now, this is not a temporary or a permanent plus 2 strength to where it would also give you carry weight or extra melee damage. This is only towards weapon handling. So if you wanted to use something like the 50 cal that requires 8 strength in order to wield effectively, this can work if you have 6 or 7 strength. This can bump you up to being able to use those. This one can actually be pretty decent, especially if you don't want to allocate a bunch of points towards the strength stat. There is a couple issues with this one though. One is that not every weapon requires a high strength requirement in order to wield it, where you're not going to be seeing a whole lot of weapons that require like 9 and 10 strength. There's only a handful of them, something like the ballistic fist, or something like the minigun are that high. The 50 cal is still fairly high at 8, but a lot of other strong weapons are much lower than that. Something like the sniper rifles, I think, are only 6. You've got other weapons like All-American that are like 4 strength in order to wield. A lot of energy weapons are like 6 strength and below. So you've got a lot of options there for weapons that don't require this much strength in order to wield effectively. And when I say wield effectively, the strength requirement on weapons generally is how much they sway. This might not be a huge factor for explosive weapons, simply because it doesn't really matter if your Fat Man is that accurate. You just need to hit close enough and you'll kill things. So weapons handling can be decent. There are a couple reasons to potentially avoid weapons handling. If you're going to go with about 5 strength, then you don't actually need to have any more strength to wield the majority of weapons, even up to something like the 50 cal. The reason for this is once you have 5 strength, you can get another +1 strength from the implant, which will take you up to 6 strength. And then if you ran to Old World Blues and did the DLC, you can get the reinforced spine, which will also give you another +2 strength. So you'll be going up to 8 strength just based on that. And with 8 strength, you're probably going to be able to use like 95% of the weapons in this game. Again, weapons handling can be good. If you're going with a low strength character, then this one can actually be pretty decent. But if you're going with a high strength character, then you probably won't need this, especially if you're going with like a melee or an unarmed build where you're probably going to have extra strength just for that reason alone. And speaking of melee and unarmed, our number 8 perk is called Unstoppable Force. Now, Unstoppable Force requires you to be level 12, it requires 7 strength, and it requires you to have 90 melee weapons, which are all fairly high requirements, although if you're going with a melee and unarmed build, you could reasonably get this by level 12. So what this perk does is that it allows you to actually do 4 times the amount of damage that you otherwise would do if you hit an enemy with melee or unarmed while they are blocking with melee or unarmed. This might sound incredibly strong because 4 times extra damage is a ton of extra damage, especially for like melee and unarmed, which already can hit quite hard. So this is a huge buff to them, right? Kind of. It can be good. This is another one of those, it can be decent. And if you're going with a purely melee and unarmed character, I wouldn't blame you at all if you took Unstoppable Force because it'd be something else to add to it just in case enemies are blocking. The main problem with this is that the majority of enemies do not block. Even melee enemies don't block very often in New Vegas. Sometimes they can, but sometimes you can just overpower them flat out anyway, with melee and unarmed because you can do that pretty well. Caesar Legion soldiers tend to be using melee and unarmed more, so it does help a bit more against them, and this can also help against super mutants, especially if they have super sledges, they might block. But a lot of other enemies are not going to be blocking. Robots are never going to be blocking. Deathclaws don't block. Giant Rad Scorpions don't block. Kazdors don't block. And any enemy that only has a gun will not block either. They'll just keep using their gun. So it doesn't really help that much against a whole lot of enemies. Yes, this can be kind of useful against blocking enemies because you'll usually kill them outright or do really high damage to them. And there are a couple melee, like, boss enemies, like Ulysses tends to use melee, so he might block and you can hurt him a lot with this. It's just one of those perks that I wouldn't prioritize in a melee or an unarmed build. Again, not saying that it's necessarily bad, but I don't think that it's one of the best. Coming in at our number 7 spot, we kind of have a general overview of XP perks. So this is going to include quite a few different perks. This is going to include Swift Learner, Here and Now, Lessons Learned, basically any sort of perk that gets you more experience. These perks might sound good on the surface because you get more XP. Something like Swift Learner, you get 10% more XP gained every time that you do anything. So 10% more XP, and you can take it 3 times, so you can have up to 30% more XP. Or Here and Now, where you can immediately level up. Or even something like Tagged, where you get 15 more points to one of your special stats. It's not really an XP gain, but sort of the same thing. The main problem with this is that there is a level cap in Fallout New Vegas. The level cap ranges from 30 to 50, depending on what DLCs you have. It's 30 in the vanilla game. It's 50 with all the DLCs added. And if you plan on playing through all the DLCs and doing a decent amount of quests, fighting things, just generally wandering around the wasteland, you can hit the level 50 level cap pretty easily. You can actually hit it so easy that you could go with the skilled trait at the very start, which gives you negative 10% XP gain. Now, there will be a difference if you took like no XP perks and you took skilled against somebody that took all XP perks. They will hit max level a little bit quicker than you, but it's not going to matter that much. And if you're comparing it to anybody that did that, they're probably wasting 5 perk points that don't do anything once you hit max level. I find the XP perks are only really good if you were doing like a speed run to max level as fast as possible, or if you were trying to speed run to a level. And that's kind of about it, because there's always better perks at basically every single level for any kind of build, more so than the XP perks, so I don't think that they're worth it. Coming in at number 6, we have Certified Tech. Certified Tech is a level 40 perk. I think it's the only level 40 perk in the game. It doesn't have any requirements to it, so you can just get this as soon as you hit level 40. What Certified Tech does, or at least what it says it's supposed to do, is give you extra damage towards robots, and you have a higher chance of finding scrap components from those robots. Now, on the surface, this seems pretty good. This one is a little bit of a tricky one because this is one of the bugged perks, so it actually doesn't work the way that it's supposed to. The way that it's supposed to work is that it gives you 25% increased crit hit chance against robots. That's not actually true. It's actually not 25%, it's 0.25% because it's coded incorrectly, or it was written incorrectly into the game. So Certified Tech does massively reduce damage towards robots. It's not as good as something like Robot Expert, which you can get, I think, at level 12. That one's a little bit more straightforward. The bonus effect on it still actually does work, where you do get the extra scrap components from this, though. So that is pretty nice, at least if you're looking for scrap components. There is also another major problem with just Certified Tech in general and getting more damage towards robots, and that's that there's just not very many robots in Fallout New Vegas. There's some of them, and there's a couple locations where you can go to fight robots, but they aren't very common throughout the wasteland. There's only a handful of places and basically just old world blues. So even if this perk did work correctly, I don't think it would be a great perk to take. It would be much better than it is right now. But this is like our only bugged perk that's on this list. I didn't feel like putting the other bugged perks on here because there is a lot of them and some of them just don't sound good from the get-go. Coming in our number 5 spot, we have Junk Rounds. Junk Rounds is a level 2 perk that requires 6 luck and 45 repair in order to get. So you can get this right at the very start of the game. And what Junk Rounds does is that it allows you to craft ammunition from scrap metal and tin cans. And this one might sound pretty good, especially since it's a dead money perk and you're going to a DLC that has limited resources. I find Dead Money to be kind of like a survival horror experience in Fallout. Not entirely, but close to it, probably the closest that we've gotten to it. So Junk Rounds kind of does make sense to where you can make different ammos. And since you can get this at level 2, you might be thinking this is worth it because you can get scrap metal and tin cans and then make some more difficult to get ammunition early on. There is kind of a major problem with Junk Rounds though, and that is whenever you make an ammo from these, you make a singular bullet for this. So if you wanted to make a 50 cal round, you could make one 50 cal round, which one 50 cal round can still be quite devastating if you have a 50 cal, but it's just one of them. And it takes a lot of resources in order to get this, since you need scrap metal and tin cans, and these tin cans have to be normal tin cans. So you can't have any of the bent tin cans. There is a problem with this, though, in Dead Money, is that tin cans are not super common, and scrap metal is not super common in Dead Money. So even if you just wanted to take this perk because you are in Dead Money, the absolute maximum amount of ammo that you can make of the junk rounds once you're in Dead Money is 54 rounds in total. Which, I mean, 54 308 rounds is still a decent amount for the automatic rifle, or 54 rounds for your police revolver is still okay enough. Or maybe even 54 rounds of your 20 gauge, or I think your 12 gauge, because I think you can get a hunting shotgun in the casino as well. They're okay at that, but that's a whole lot of side questing to do, a whole lot of just collecting stuff to do in order for you to get a slight advantage in that DLC. And now that I think about it, this perk is actually bugged too. Not bugged in the same way as the previous perk, so this is actually going to be our second bugged perk to show up on the list. The reason why this perk is bugged is that it's a Dead Money perk. And Dead Money perks you can pick at level 2 in Good Springs, leave Good Springs, and then choose to reset your character, and you'll keep any of the Dead Money perks. It's just that this is not really a huge advantage for junk rounds. Yeah, it's basically just a free perk, but even as a free perk, it's really not that great. If you're going to do that, I would really recommend you take Light Touch over this. Even if you don't plan on using light armor, it's still a whole lot better. Or at the very least, Old World Gourmet, which is a little bit better overall. And speaking of Dead Money, our next perk kind of ties into that. At number 4, we have Long Haul. Long Haul is a level 12 perk that requires 6 endurance and 70 barter in order to get. And this one makes it so that you can fast travel even when you're over encumbered. This one can be seen as a quality of life perk. The main reason why I've seen this perk pop up, that people say it's not that bad, is that once you do Dead Money, and if you plan on stealing all the gold bars, you can just fast travel to any vendor that you want and sell all of them. That is true, and that is a nice quality of life bonus to Long Haul. But by that time, I've probably already completed Old World Blues, and if you have completed Old World Blues, you have the teleporter, which can instantly teleport you to a place where you can just store your stuff. Then you could just take the bars out, however many at a time, depending on your character's carry weight, and transfer them to the Mojave so that you can sell them. Or you can just keep selling them in the sink, because the sink has a lot of caps too. That kind of mitigates the travel time of the gold bars anyway. You don't need to be carrying around that many. It's still going to be faster, especially on PC where loading screens are much quicker, where you can just travel to the sink, grab some gold bars, travel back, fast travel to wherever you're going, sell them, and then keep just traveling back. It won't be as slow as like Long Haul because you can just keep fast traveling and jumping there, but it's a minor buff at most to really any character. I don't think Long Haul is really worth it. I think the carry weight perks would be more worth this, so something like Burden to Bear or Strong Back would be a whole lot better. At our number 3 spot, we have Rad Absorption. So Rad Absorption is a level 28 perk. It's the only level 28 perk in the base game. This one requires 7 endurance as well to use. What Rad Absorption does is it slowly reduces your radiation level over time. And that might sound pretty good, especially in a game called Fallout, where you will have to worry about radiation. There's kind of a problem in and of that, and that is that you never really have to worry about radiation, though, in New Vegas. There are a couple of places that are highly irradiated, but you can just stock up on various chems in order to get through them. If you have enough Radaway, you can just go through just about anything. If you have Rad-X, this will reduce the amount of radiation you have. So by the time you're getting to level 28, you've probably already stocked up on a decent amount of supplies, and you won't have to be worrying about radiation. As well as you could also equip clothes that reduce radiation overall too. And if you have 7 endurance, which is needed for this perk, you're going to have a decent amount of radiation resist already on your character. There is also another major downside of this perk, and that is that its tick rate is very slow. This reduces 1 rad every 20 in-game seconds. So it's fairly slow. It is really, really slow in order for you to reduce a sizable amount of radiation. This perk could be useful if you need to get up and leave your computer pretty often, or leave your console, whatever you're playing on, to where maybe you have kids or something and you took this because you didn't want to use your medical supplies. So something's happening, put the controller down, go help your kids, come back, and you've actually seen a decent amount of radiation go down. That's about the best case scenario I can think for this perk, because if you're impatient like me, you're just going to be using your chems anyway, or you're just going to fast travel to a doctor to get your radiation taken care of. There's plenty of doctors throughout the wasteland anyway. Even more so if you have places like Old World Blues unlocked, where you can just go right to the auto dock and have everything fixed for you right away and then just leave. You could do that anytime that you stop by there, and it's probably going to be much faster than any amount that you would see drop down from Rad Absorption. I think this is one of the worst perks in the game, although it does sound kind of decent on paper. Coming in at our number 2 spot, we have Computer Whiz. Computer Whiz is a level 18 perk that requires 7 intelligence and 70 science. What Computer Whiz does is it allows you to have another attempt at hacking a computer if you've been locked out of a computer. So when you do the hacking minigame, you have picked 4 answers, those 4 answers were wrong, you're locked out. If you have Computer Whiz, you can go back to the computer and you get another 4 answers to pick. This sounds really good because you can unlock areas, and if you get stuck behind them, then certain areas and certain items become unattainable for you, and that does kind of suck, so this would be a way to reset that. There is one major problem with Computer Whiz, though, and that is that you never need to be locked out of a computer. Even if you don't know anything about the computer game and you're just clicking answers at random, I actually made a guide on this just the other day, so if you want to check that out, that will give you a more in-depth understanding of the computer game and an easier way to beat it, so hopefully that helps you out. But here's just an easy way to do it if you don't know that. Pick 3 answers, and then you see the red button on your computer, go over there and click that, or exit out on your controller, and then come right back to the computer. This will take the computer time to load back up, but it will reset the computer, so it'll reset the password, and it'll give you another 4 guesses. Just keep using 3 guesses and then leaving. You never need to be locked out of a computer, ever. So this perk is redundant once you know that trick, once you know that thing that you can do. So yeah, there you go. That one's pretty useless once you know that. And speaking of useless perks, our number 1 perk is Infiltrator, which this one might also sound kind of useful, at least just reading it, because this makes it so if you've ever broken a lock and you can't get back into it, this gives you a second attempt at the lock. You do need to be level 18, you need to have 7 perception and 7 lockpicking in order to get this one. This one is also completely redundant though. If you've played the lockpicking minigame, you're probably going to be pretty used to it, and you can just play the minigame normally. If you keep breaking your bobby pins, that's usually not a huge deal because you get a ton of bobby pins in this game. How this happens though is for you hitting the force to open the lock. If you hit the force to open up the lock, there is a chance that you just break it and you can't get back into it. So you never need to do that. You could just unmap that button or just completely ignore that button. That's what I do. And you never have to worry about being locked out and having to go get a perk in order to try to get back into a safe. I would just say do that over trying to break lockpicks in there, because with this, it kind of just incentivizes you breaking the first one and then actually playing the minigame. Or breaking the first one and then just pressing through this again and breaking the second one, and then you're permanently locked out of that container, which there are some unique weapons located in locked containers that you can't get otherwise because there is no key to them, like the Gobi Scout campaign rifle and Lucky. Both of those are behind locks that don't have keys to them, so you will need to break into them with lockpicking. And that'll do it for 10 kind of deceptively bad perks, or just deceiving perks in general. Again, some of these perks can be pretty good. Splash damage can be pretty good. Unstoppable force can be good on certain characters. Like weapons handling can be pretty decent on certain characters as well. So there is some that are pretty decent. It's just there's a lot that aren't really that good. I also didn't want to include just obviously bad perks that just sound bad in general. Like Cannibal, where Cannibal isn't really that great of a perk, but it's mainly for role-playing purposes, so I feel like most people understand that if they pick that, they know what they're getting into. I'm also going to be doing some surprisingly good perks, too, coming up soon, so be on the lookout for that. Thanks, everybody, for watching this. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye!